every day from kindergarten to 12th grade, we need to be thinking about what's that student going to look like when we hand them the diploma.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Well, I want to be called Chief Hall Monitor.
Chief Hall Monitor.
You have a little booklet. You just all
like,
passes. That's exactly right. Law and order around here, guys. Get to class.
Vest.
Oh yeah, orange.
How about one of those like
sash that,
lightsabers that they use at the airport just to direct people? Get to
Chief
class.
Hall Monitor.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Paul and Martin, some familiar voices. And today we have the privilege of having Mr. Jeremy Breland join us. Welcome, Jeremy.
Yeah, good to be back. Yeah.
Yes, back. Jeremy serves as the dean here at our Highlands Latin School campus for 9th through 12th graders.
That's right.
You teach a fantastic literature class for 11th graders.
Yeah, superlatives. I
Yes.
like that.
What books do you cover in that class?
The main book that we probably all need to talk about at least one time today is Anna Karenina.
Yes,
So that's the one
that's
that
right.
takes months to cover.
Mhm.
But we also do a couple of Shakespeare's, King Lear,
Okay.
also Hamlet, and then we cap it off with The Great Gatsby, which is probably the most modern book those kids will read their
That's right.
entire time there at school. So yeah, so those four.
Perfect.
Yeah, and some poetry, of course.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
The Great Gatsby has gotten some airtime on this podcast as of late with Tanya. We were just talking about that
okay.
Oh, yeah.
a couple
wasn't
episodes
here.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. She readily admitted that after the fourth time through, she finally thought it was okay to leave in the curriculum. So you're going to be doing it again
It's
next
working.
year.
It's working.
It is. It is. Well, we're glad to have
Yeah,
you. Thanks
good to
for
be.
making time.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to make a joke about the three wise men or something sitting here, but
I give
feel
her
like that'd be-
permission to make that reference.
I feel like that'd be appropriate.
that's right. Oh, well,
I'd let it be known I'm not giving her permission, so I'm going to be the one.
The two wise men.
Yes, I'll be the. What was it? They had the fourth wise man. Was it the one that?
Yeah,
you ever see that movie?
No, well, there was a short story.
The short
Was it,
story?
the fourth wise. It wasn't the.
I feel like there was when I
Wow.
was a kid. I remember seeing like a movie of it.
It was like an O. Henry short
from his
Yeah, I
story.
think-
perspective or something?
No, it was like
Oh.
this. It was this fourth guy that like traveled with the three. And then somehow he gets lost, but his whole life is like actually encountering Jesus
Oh,
and like actually living, not just coming and offering gifts and being gone, but like actually walking the walk.
Huh.
If what I recall.
But we'll cover for you.
that's right.
Okay, I'll
The two wise
I'll
men
be
will
off
make up
doing
for
by
it.
myself. Walking the walk.
Oh. Okay. Well, that was a little bit of a tangent. My fault. But Jeremy, you are the perfect addition because today on our episode, we're going to be talking about educational methods and we're going to be comparing and discussing traditional versus modern, what we mean by that, how it plays out in the classroom, why we at Memoria Press and Highlands Latin School choose the method we do.
Sure.
Before we get there, we always talk about what we're reading. I'm going to give you, Jeremy, a minute to think about it.
Okay.
But, gentlemen,
I just finished a book on American Pharaoh, which is the horse that won the Triple Crown. I don't know, several years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very interesting to hear just everything that goes into finding a horse that can shine like that. And the owners and the trainers and everything that goes into it. Because I think, you grew up in Kentucky, you watch Kentucky Derby, you're
Right.
like, ooh, horses,
Right.
they come, they run, and there's a lot that goes into it.
right?
And I think in the book they said that horse racing is the oldest American sport. That can't be, I guess that depends on what you consider American, because lacrosse was a Native American.
Well,
Native American.
this year was the 151st
It was.
Kentucky Derby, so that's getting
probably the
pretty old.
oldest, probably the oldest
the oldest thing in the
professional
world.
sport.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I watched Ben-Hur. It's in Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur's old.
I would think it'd be like hunting, but
That's right. I guess it
Yeah.
depends on how you define
Right.
sport,
Sport,
which
right.
is probably a pretty controversial definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was interesting.
Oh,
Yeah, hunting, you do that to eat.
it's
Not really
boring.
a sport, really.
Yeah.
some people.
Gently.
You could shoot
Legitimately
things for
sport.
sport, but that's kind of
Sure.
lame.
Yeah.
That's an inflammatory statement for some people.
Well, yeah.
Let me know, Mark.
I'm not against hunting. But
Yes, Martin has never hunted.
Yeah.
Mm.
It is one thing on his bucket list, though, I believe.
I had a BB gun when I was a kid, and I shot things that I wasn't supposed
Neighborhood
to.
squirrel.
Yeah.
What are you reading, Martin?
Well, actually, I'm reading The Schools We Need, which I brought today for our discussion, which I'm teaching. One of the books I'm teaching in our classical pedagogy class at memoriacollege.org. And I've been reading a lot of, we did two different Hirsch books last week and this week. So that's kind of for work, if you will. And then, but then I started Jack Reacher, the Jack Reacher books again. Yeah, because I tried to listen to the first one, and the reader was terrible. And then I started into the second one. Now, and Tanya needs to do this with books that she says she's reading too. That those are not necessarily for everybody. I've read the Jack Reacher books, so I don't know what's in there in terms of objectionable material or any. I think if it's like the TV series, there might be a little bit. I don't know, but I like good action thriller books, and those are prominent among those.
What was that listener we had write in when we did the mailbag episode that said something about books that have been published in the last 50 years and how bad they were? I stand with her.
I think there's a whole lot of writers who are good writers. That I think I have a bias too for older literature, but I think it's the difference between great books and good books. There's a lot of good books that have been written in the last 50 years. Maybe not a lot of great books. A lot of good books. People there are people who are good storytellers. They just are, and you can stick your nose in the air and say, well, that's modern, but the calendar is not what determines.
No, the calendar is definitely not what determines. But I every time I try, just disappointing.
Yeah, but even like Wendell Berry.
Yeah, there are exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions to the rule.
Trying to help you out, Martin.
But I just, Jack Reacher just doesn't. I don't believe he's an exception to the rule.
Below the bar, if Wendell Berry is going to make it in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we don't make as many just pure action. We don't write pure action books like we used to that are just enjoyable in and of themselves as a narrative. Right? Whatever else they may have in terms of cultural significance. There's just some writers who can write a great plot with great characters and an interesting setting, and it's enjoyable. There's something of value in that mere thing.
Yes, agreed. That's not what I seek that in some ways. That's why I like my Sabatini books. I like that sort of thing, but that's just not.
Well, I listen a lot when I walk, so I don't have time. Yeah. I read more serious books. I like to read and I like to mark and that sort of thing. But there's a time I have that I can't do that I would love to be listening to a story, and I do.
Well, the irony is the American Pharaoh book was written within the past 50 years.
Yeah.
But nobody wanted to point that out. But no, it was fine. But I just, again, it's not one that I would say, like, everybody needs to drop and go pick up. It was an interesting look at the horse industry. Just like, watching Secretariat or something would be an interesting, foray into a section of the world that you probably don't see much.
And you live in Kentucky, so.
And I should know. Yeah. That kind of stuff.
Paul and his principles.
Yes.
Oh, Jeremy.
Yeah.
What's on your bookshelf these days?
Well, a lot of things that I wish I could get to, but I'm like you, Martin. I've got a lot of just little small tasks like commuting and doing this and doing that I want to be listening to something substantive. I've listened to some podcasts, things like that, but I've just re-upped my Audible account. And when I re-upped it, it was like, hey, you should check out this. And it was a book that was popular when I was in school. I don't know why. I guess because it was edgy. It's Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five.
Oh yeah,
so I've been listening to that, and it's, I don't know. I'm having a hard time finishing it.
I feel like Kurt Vonnegut is one of those authors that people They just know his name.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm obliged to, so I have it on my list, but I keep moving it down because I've heard that.
It'd be a study in psychology is what it needs to be, rather than a study in like humanity.
Right.
So yeah, I'll get to the end of it and check it off my list. But I'm not done. I've got, as I'm listening to it, I have about like an hour and a half left to go. So there's plenty of book left to go. But man, I'm dragging through it. There's a little scene where he's a POW. Billy Pilgrim's a POW in World War II, and he gets put with these like aristocratic British officers, and that's the most enjoyable portion of it, just because it's funny and it's actually witty. And I'm like, oh, there you go. Like that's what I kind of want out of it. But then it's gone, and it's
maybe you should have picked another book from your school days. Maybe Catcher in the Rye.
Oh well,
that would have helped.
Honestly, yeah, that's true.
Jeremy, will you ever put a book down? Like, be like, no, I'm not doing that.
I will when I'm reading. I will do that because I invest so much more when I'm reading. I can kind of just listen to Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah.
But I'm like Martin. I don't want to listen to like substantive books. I want to like mark them up and sit with them and like put them down and think about it for a little bit. If I get to a book that I'm actually like physically reading, I'll put it down and say, I think I'm done. Yeah. So
that makes sense.
But I haven't done that very many times, to be honest. I try to actually read older literature and listen to newer literature. So,
but novels would be my exception. I mean, I can listen to Anna Karenina.
Yeah. We're listening for days.
That's right.
Days and days and days.
40
and
hours
days
at least.
through the long Russian winter.
Yes.
Oh, well, moving right along. Today's discussion, methods for educating children. There have been a lot of fads, a lot of debates, a lot of opinions. And we can hope and agree that it's really toward the end of serving our children well. But the two methods we're going to pick out and compare, and I'm sure we might cover others, are the traditional versus the more modern method of educating children and classroom management, things like that. But maybe we should start, and Jeremy, I'll begin with you, though I'm sure Martin and Paul will make their additions. What do we mean by a traditional versus a modern method when it comes to educating children or the classroom?
Yeah. I mean, it even just begins the way the classrooms are organized, right? It's a traditional classroom where you won't find kids, wrapped around in circles where really they're focused on each other rather than the board or the presentation or whatever's happening. So traditional education even goes into how you arrange the room so that the students' focus is actually on the actual purpose of what we're doing in there. That's a really, and also that helps with discipline. It helps with keeping things uniform where a teacher's able to move and be able to keep everybody on track. But I would say traditional education has a goal. When you write your lesson plans, you actually have a premise you want to deliver to the students. And your lesson, right, is achieved or not achieved by the student actually understanding the principle that you want to deliver to them. So if I'm writing lesson plans and I really want them to understand this thing, let's say in like a literature or classical studies or humanities class, I'm going to be helping them and guiding them and walking with them step by step by step by step to get to that. I always think of a traditional pedagogy as you watch me do it one time, right? And then we do it together. And then I let you do it guided by yourself. And then we come back and wrap it back up that kind of way. So I think a traditional education is actually an objective education. We are focused on a thing and we're going to accomplish that thing today.
I see.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that in a traditional education would prioritize the content
absolutely
as the star of the show?
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe modern would prioritize the child, or what would modern education prioritize?
Yeah, I think like exploration and expression, like exploration and expression, where traditional education says like, you've come here and you've been, we can say like enlisted, you've been enlisted to come here because your parents see a value in what we are teaching and they want you to know that thing. Okay. So it is in a kind of way transactional, but in another kind of way, it is a delivery of actual love for that student, where that teacher is so excited about what they know. They want other people to know about that, and they're going to leverage their lives, right? Delivering that to children, across generations, rather than saying to the child in a modern sense, we're going to get here and I want you to test the boundaries. I want you to explore. I want you to go and find what works and what doesn't. And then we'll circle back, and then we'll kind of like collect our data of what we've found out, and then we'll assess our data. Yeah. So
interesting. Okay. But this question goes out to anybody. What would you say to someone who says, but that is the approach that I think is going to be the most refining to my child?
You mean the exploration? And,
yes. Yes.
What I would say is you don't have in that sort of model, you really don't have any sort of goal or end, right? And so there really is no valuable way to assess were we able to set a goal and achieve that? Have we achieved that? Are we ready to move on to the next thing? Or anything along those lines. I think, also it raises the question of, is the child innately good and oriented towards learning? Right. And figuring things out and honing his reason. I would say he's not. I would say the child is not oriented that way, is fundamentally flawed. Some of us use the term original sin. And therefore that child has to be intentionally helped and formed in the way he understands the world, sees the world, the way it works, all that kind of stuff. And so, that's not to say, I mean, because I look at this all the time, like as adults, we struggle to let kids have the freedom they need to have when it's appropriate for them to have it. This isn't like, Jeremy mentioned, traditional education, kids are facing to the front. They're not sitting around focused on each other. That's absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that the class is merely just a teacher speaking at them and there's no engagement. There's no interaction. No, that has to happen too. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's in some ways I was thinking along the same lines, right? That traditional content's king and modern child's king. But in some ways, that's a dichotomy that we're allowing the modern that really is incorrect. Because in a thriving traditional classroom, as Jeremy kind of pointed out at the end, there is a love for the child here. There is a priority given to the child's mastery of this content, but it's the both and, right? It's the content and the child, and understanding where the child's at and what we need to offer them in order for them to grow into an adult. It's education for adulthood, not childhood that we just want them to play and thinking that childhood is good in of itself. It's childhood for adulthood.
Yeah. Or even naturally lent to go to the direction that we want it to go, right? Like your idea here about original sin, I mean, it starts with even kind of an ontological idea. Like, what is this child actually? Like, it's a human being, and something's happened. This child does not want to come to school. It doesn't love the things that it should love. And there's a kind of way in which we show them the good things, but we show them why the good things, and we ask them to grapple with those questions and think about those questions, and we can lead them to the right, even loves, even tastes, right? Before we send them out. I mean, I think we're kind of here talking about like even like just an objective in a classroom that day, but the objective, like handing that student a diploma, is that you are a fully formed human being, right? You are at least oriented now to the direction that you can keep going, right? Like you've got your moorings correctly now. Yeah. And that now you should be able to trust yourself and trust your instincts and trust your mind, trust your loves to be able to actually pursue that truth and pursue that goodness. So yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, every day from kindergarten to 12th grade, we need to be thinking about what's that student going to look like when we hand them the diploma, right? Yeah.
Well, it's always mystified me why we would create an institution which has a place you have to be and a place you have to sit, and it has a staff of people to oversee you, all for the sake of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes no sense at all. If you want to be free, why do you have to build a building? There's a field over there.
Just let them run wild.
Just let them run. If you want to be free, So this freedom versus order dichotomy is very strong between progressivism. We've called it modernism. I call it progressivism, and traditionalism. Traditionalism. You have to have order even to have school at all. You got some kind of order. So if you're looking for freedom, bad place to go. But yet you have many educators who say that that's their goal. And that doesn't make any sense to me at all. You have to have order if you're going to have an institution and you're going to have something happen that's valuable that day in a classroom. And you have a teacher there because the teacher knows things that the students do not. And they know how to do things that the students can't do. And they're there to impart those. And it's like, can we not all agree that this is the purpose of education? Because for progressives, this is very mixed up.
Yeah.
I see the thoughts.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm ready to add something just yet. Yeah. I'm thinking of stories.
I am too.
In the classroom or with adults that have differing views than you?
In the classroom,
really?
just
Okay.
with our foster kids that by law they got to go to public school, and so just my engagement there, and there's some things that modern public schools, or private schools that are progressive, as Martin kind of pointed out, like progressive schools do well. And my experience with a couple of different public schools is that like the state really has forced them to, for the students that struggle, like the students that need an IEP, right? Their individualized education plan, I guess what it is.
Yeah.
To really put the resources there to help them. But when our little foster child, who is now back with her mom and she's thriving, but she was in kindergarten and she didn't know her letters. She didn't know her numbers. It was most of the way through the year. And on the last day of school, we got an IEP set up for her. I mean, it was something the state wanted, and the mom was in support. We all met together with the school and we figured out on the last day of the year. And in that conversation, I said, and I'd asked the child's mom before, because I didn't want to like throw this out and blindside her, but I said, how about we consider having her repeat kindergarten? Because I'm coming from a paradigm in which there's a body of knowledge, there's content and skills that child should walk out of kindergarten with. And I suggest this to this team of people at the school, which the principal's not in the meeting. It's a whole team of other people, and they all kind of look at each other and say, we can't tell you this, but we agreed that, yeah, she should, but you got to talk to the principal. And we're like, okay. So we have a meeting with the principal.
So that team of people wasn't authorized to...
They weren't authorized to say she needs to repeat. What they were only authorized to do was to then put in the resources, whether it's speech therapy, whether it's a reading specialist to come in during reading and try to help with her or whatever, in order to try to shore up where she was deficient, which was like everywhere.
Yeah. So what's the IEP, individual education plan? What's the IEP going to say? Read, write, and add, subtract, and multiply.
Effectively, but it just gives.
So is that different from what you're doing in the regular school?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we met with the principal, the whole conversation was, I said, I would like her to repeat kindergarten. Well, the response I got was, research says that there will be a short-term gain because, right, like maybe she's mastered the first 2 months of kindergarten and you'll see her do better those 2 months. And then there won't be any long-term gain. She won't be any further in third grade, for having repeated kindergarten when she gets to third grade. And we kind of went back and forth on this. And she said, you have to realize that our classrooms, like, she is not she's not unique in the classroom, that there's 4 or 5 or 6 other kids at her level, and there's 4 or 5 or 6 other kids at a different level. And there's 4, and she said, when you walk into that classroom, they're all doing different things. And my wife goes, that sounds like chaos.
Because that is the goal. Yeah. Individualized learning is one of a progressive goal. It's all the individual student and not the class. And this idea that, well, this child just has a hard time learning and that's why she's not learning. It's not because we don't have everybody in the class on the same page. Thaddeus Lott could go to the inner city in Houston using direct instruction, which is similar to some of the things we use. And this is a very poor, very low socioeconomic area, and these kids are blowing the tops off tests and doing better than the schools in the good districts. Okay, because they're doing it right. They're doing a traditional program. Everything, there's order, and there's a coherent curriculum so that you know where you're supposed to be at every point, and it's kind of haphazard in most schools. They don't know what's a 5th grader supposed to be doing. Well, I don't think they even know.
Right. And because it's all standard driven instead of content driven, right? Then we can put a screen in front of them for 15 minutes and say, go read about anything that's in this category. So they can get on their screen and they can pick 1 out of 1,000 books that has to do something with science or life science, let's say. But then there's no way to then have a conversation, those kids to have a conversation between them because they all decided to read different things.
Yeah. Well, and this is why Mark Cuban wrote a book on education technology, and he was in favor of this. But one of the things they want to do, is one of the reasons for technology, getting doing not a ThinkPad, but a Chromebook. Chromebooks are real big in schools. They want to do that because that's part of the progressive program, is to take get the teacher out of the front of the classroom, because what those schools are doing is they have these Chromebooks, and the teacher is basically just a monitor, and she's going around making sure that they're doing whatever they're doing on their computers, and that's a part of the whole progressive agenda of getting the teacher out from the front of the classroom. It's why they don't like desks. All the desks, rows of desks face toward the front of the classroom where there is a teacher who knows stuff that the students don't. And they just don't like that. And so they try to make it as chaotic as possible, because then it's back on the individual student, which is not good for them, but that's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going that way in a lot of things, right? It just seems like a copy and paste kind of model. I mean, that's what McDonald's is doing, right? You go not now to a person, you go down to the computer and you type in what you want, but there's somebody there facilitating it, right? Making sure the machines are doing correctly and everybody's kind of knows how to use the machines correctly and things like that. But there's just something like a absence of humanity. I mean, I don't necessarily like fast food, but when I go to my fast food establishment, I want to talk to a human being who actually was back there and flipping the thing. I mean, some of the best conversations I've actually ever had with people, like randomly in the world, was over a cash register. I mean, that's an inherently human thing, right?
The one place that we haven't done that? At a bar. I mean, it just dawned on me because why? Yeah. Because in the fast food places, we taught ourselves over decades that no, we don't really want to have a human interaction. We just want to give. We want it to be efficient. Whereas the bars are very much, no, you're going to come here and you're going to spend time here. In which case you want human connection. In which case, no bar. I've never seen a bar attempt to replace the bartender with a machine.
Well, and what is the relationship between the teacher and the student? It's a person with a well-formed soul trying to form the souls of the students. Yeah, and machines can't do that. Because they don't have souls.
And teachers will have a really hard time achieving what they would like to achieve if they're not in it in that kind of way, like if they're not recognizing that person right over there is not just a dump that I can just dump the curriculum or like what did we say like the state objectives that they want to, like I could just kind of like let you click on the state objective that you want to and we can kind of check it off like a checklist. A teacher will not be able to perform their duty to the height that they could without recognizing that young person over there and saying, I love you, and I want you to understand this because I think that you will have a better life if you do understand this. It is not just like clicking the things at the very fancy McDonald's, right? I mean that can happen without love, right? The classroom cannot happen without an actual love for the student. Yeah.
And that's an interesting framework to say it actually dehumanizes.
Absolutely.
Where I don't know that the progressive or folks who subscribe to that would agree, but that's what it sounds like to me.
And I see for the individual education plans, like I see the humanity in that. I see that like that child there needs something else. Like that is a good reaction. Like that is a reaction of love. Like that child's falling behind or that child needs something else. Like I want to like tailor this to that child. I mean, I had a student several years ago that was a freshman, and I could see that this young man was reading at he wrote an essay, and I thought that is an undergraduate essay. So I took the essay to lunch one day with him, and I sat down and I said, "You're going to make a 100, but I need you to fix these things in this essay because I want you to know that this could be better. Like this could be much better." So him and I sat there at lunch and he brought it back to me without any kind of incentive of grade, right? Because he was going to make 100, but he brought it back to me all tailored up, all put together. Like that's a good thing. I've also sat with students on the reverse end where a student just was not understanding it. And I said to the students like, hey, class starts at 8. I want you to be there at like 7:35 at my desk, and you and I are going to go over notes together. I don't need to do that with every other student, but like you and I, we're going to sit down and we're going to go back over your notes so that you understand before the quiz what we were actually trying to communicate, and actually watch the students' notes get better. Because there was a tension. He realized there was going to be a little check. I was going to go like, show me your notes. And I mean, there's a goodness in actually tailoring it to an individual, but not to the detriment of the whole enterprise.
Right, but that's
not
a part of the syllabus for your class and how you're working that out in there, and the curriculum at your school. Everyone knows where they're supposed to be. I mean, part of the problem in most schools is there is no plan.
No touchstone, right?
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to be here. That's right. Yeah.
Right. Well, and they would say that the touchstones are the standards. It's the skills that they're supposed to master, but you can't do that without content.
Yeah.
Right. You can't do it without a curriculum. The standards are up here.
Yeah.
The curriculum is here.
Yeah.
The syllabus is here, and those things have to be coordinated and based on. But so just having these standards way out there, they think they've done something when we've created new state standards or something. No, you haven't done anything yet.
I mean, you can maybe even get a student to like check the right box on a test, right? And you go standard, right?
Right.
But there is something above just like general, digesting of content. There is something about, like you said earlier, like we're not just content deliverers. I want you to like wrestle with that thing. I want you to own that thing. I want you to think around it, because I mean, I can think about things that I've thought where I've been challenged on something either like religiously or in the humanities, like, is that right? And I'll go and sit and think about it. And then I either reject it or I go, I need to amend my current positions. I need to actually own this piece of knowledge now. I need to actually change that. And a lot of times that changes entire schemes of things, right? Because like once I accept that, I have to reassess everything. And that is just a process of education. It's not just like content delivery. I went check, but I do not believe that thing I just checked. Like I don't actually love that thing I just checked. I don't actually own that thing I just checked. Education is actually not just checking. It's forming, right? Yeah. So.
And the child will pick up that what they're doing is just checking, or it's and we talk about, we want students to have a love of learning, but when what the culture is telling them is you just have to meet these standards, instead of like, wait a second, let's sit here and contemplate this idea because that idea is worth contemplating. Then that's where you're really establishing this love of learning.
But at the same time, there are times in school that that seem like drudgery. There's some
absolutely.
mechanical
Absolutely.
things you've got to take care of before you can move on and do the higher order stuff.
I absolutely hated working on penmanship.
Yeah. So you do.
Nobody loves grammar, right? Like nobody loves grammar.
Some people do.
Well,
eventually.
Exactly. You usually love grammar once you get up to the top, and then you look back down and go like, "That's beautiful. I love that."
Yeah.
Right? You usually don't love grammar when like you get the test and it's sitting in front of you. It's like, "Is this an adjective or a noun?" And you're like,
Yeah, but we can't necessarily expect every child to know the significance of what he's studying. They just can't.
Yeah.
So it's your responsibility as an adult to just get them through it. Some of it seems mindless, and you just got to. But you can make that easier by establishing a routine and doing different things in the class. A good teacher knows how to do those things to get you through that in a way that the student can tolerate.
Absolutely.
But we have to, and this is one of the things with progressivism. They're not willing to be patient enough to take care of the lower order stuff, so that they can get to the higher order stuff. They want to start at the end, and you can't do that.
It goes back to order. Back to order. You see disorder in the classroom. You see disorder in the way content's presented. It's all, and there's probably some form of order there, but it's not the proper order.
And you can almost see, maybe this is a leap, but you can almost see how that kind of creates maybe a disordered orientation for the student toward learning. Because you think about kids who, Jeremy, I'm thinking about your image of what do I want, what type of person do I want to see when I hand them the diploma? You think about a child who's been through all the way through the progressive or like a more modern system. What is their orientation to even success? If they're not like a kid who's internally motivated to just do well, because some kids just aren't, they might be bright or whatever, but they aren't motivated by grades or whatever. And so you think about the different personalities you're dealing with in the classroom, and if they've kind of had this disordered experience where, well, I know how to succeed because I can check a box, or I'm not really motivated to do this and it doesn't matter because no one keeps me accountable and it doesn't make sense anyway. And then they get out the door, and what have we done with them?
Well, and Aristotle talks about ethos, logos, and pathos. The character of the teacher that's attractive to students, the logos, the presentation of the material, and then a pathos, which is inspiring the child. And we'd all like to inspire the child, but you can't always do that. They can't always be inspired, and so you have to teach them how to work, and you have to make them realize that that's a noble thing. My education, I was a fairly disinterested student in school. I didn't get inspired till I was in college, right? So, but I wished I had learned how to work earlier, and just to get through the stuff, just come up with a routine. My parents didn't know that, so they didn't know to teach it to me. Yeah. But you have to have a routine. You have to understand this is work and this is good. And I see my grandkids. And they're doing that. They're learning how to work. At my oldest at Highlands is learning how to work, and he knows that he's got to get this much work done a day. He does it. It's a part of his duty, and he does it, and it's not bad because he's used to it. It's a routine.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we should even say that about traditional education, is that there is a lesson even in structure. Like there's a lesson even in just, I have math tonight and it's going to take me 30, 45 minutes to do. And I just have to sit down and make time every single night. I have Latin every single night. And there's something good for the soul in motivation. Because I know a lot of my peers. I mean, what you just said just a moment ago, Martin, that was me. I mean, I was clever enough to not study and make my B's. Yeah. And if I could stay on that side of a C, my parents were fine, right? Because, I mean, they were doing the best they could. They took me to my dad's alma mater. I mean, it was a good place. I mean, I could have gotten a really great education there. I just wasn't motivated. I was clever enough to like get the B and move on. It wasn't until I got to college that I started seeing, well, there's something exciting about this. Like, there's something more underneath the surface, just like there, that I actually really want to know about. And once I got started, I couldn't stop. I think for the sake of even just, like you said, you can't inspire everybody, but I can teach somebody how to order even their affairs. Like I can teach somebody how to order their soul, that like you have to actually chasten yourself. Like what I would like to do is go sit down and watch Netflix for 3 hours tonight. What I need to do, right, is go get my math homework and sit down with it, because, you know, Mr. Hernandez is not going to let me get by tomorrow, right, if I didn't do that. And there is a kind of way in which we learn to like that kind of thing. Like we nobody likes order to begin with, right? But we end up realizing that order actually helps me be free later, right? Like order helps me be free. Order today helps me be free tomorrow.
Well, and it just makes you happier, right? Like you go to bed at a certain time, you wake up more refreshed, right? Like, whereas if you're constantly changing what time you go to bed, you're always going to be exhausted.
Absolutely.
You might always be exhausted with the same bedtime too. But that's probably because you're just not sleeping enough. And so that order helps. And there will be a time as that child grows that, you know, if that child's learned in first, second, third, fourth grade, like you just got to do this. But then when they hit middle school, they hit high school, they'll bucket some. But that routine actually functions as like a life preserver for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's important. And it's a routine, needs to be a routine at home with homework. It needs to be a routine in the classroom of this sort of like the liturgy of our class, or this is just what we do every day.
Yeah, and the irony is that for students, I think like you and I were, there were certain teachers who organized the class really well, and that order made it enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember specifically a Spanish teacher I had, and Mrs. Smith, and it was her name, and she...
Sorry, I was expecting a different kind of name.
No. But it was almost mechanistic, what you did in her class, because language is all strange, and different foreign languages is all strange, and it's different words, and it's different ways of putting the words together, and it's just you feel unsafe as a student in that kind of. But when you have somebody who structures it for you, and I really think of Cheryl Lowe when I think of this lady, because she was doing Spanish the way we do Latin. And I enjoyed it. I made A's in that class. I wasn't making A's in any other class because she was organized and everything was step by step, and I could see my progress and that sort of thing. And I don't think so back to kind of what you said before, order makes you free. Yeah. Okay. Pure freedom, very overrated. Yeah. But you impose order and you can be freer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and Cheryl left a binder of writings on Latin, and it was particularly, she was working at the tail end of her life on the 9th through 12th grade sequence. And she's got a line in there where she was just talking about how every year she wanted it to get harder. She didn't want it to get easier, right at the tail end. But she said, in doing this, and I think it was mainly in homework, like she was like, they have to have Latin homework every night. And she said, the goal is that by the time they graduate, they have a begrudging affection for Latin. And that stuck with me because I thought that that's totally contrary to the modern idea of this should be enjoyable now, rather than this become something that we love because we've worked so hard. Whether we want to love it or not, we're going to love it because we've worked so hard to do it.
Go out and find something that like you love. Go out and find something that feels good, right? Like you won't go out and find that Latin feels good the first couple of times that you do it, right? Like you will learn to love it. I mean, there's a real thing about repetition growing one's affection, right? Like repetition growing, like real affection too, not just like fluttery emotional kind of affection. Like, no, like I actually do care about this thing. Like this is something that
and if I don't have it, I would miss it.
When you like something, you repeat it over and over and over again, and particularly children.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's repetition and like you said, the order also builds trust. I mean, I think about a lower school student. You like knock one thing out of the routines, things are like. Like, no, we're supposed to do this. Like, you've forgotten to do this.
They'll tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's one of the best things about subbing in a lower school because you just walk in and the kids will tell you exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be staring. And then one of the girls will raise her hand.
Yes.
Mr. Cawthorn, aren't we going to do X?
Yeah.
Of course, I was just getting to that.
And that doesn't stop. Right. That doesn't stop. They may not be as sweet and, desirous of the order, but that doesn't stop. If I don't do a recitation, because I do recitations at the very beginning of every class in 11th grade, if I don't do the recitation, students will kind of look around just a little bit like, are we not doing it today? And I think it is kind of like he forgot about it, or he's like, he's rushing. But I do think students are going, we're not following the routine here. So they may not admit it, but they might miss it a little bit.
Mrs. Smith does it this way. And I'm doing it this way.
Martin in the classroom.
Yeah.
So it sounds like students really can rise to the occasion when you push them to it and give them what they need.
And I've seen schools when I've worked alongside schools that have very much have a mentality of the child-centeredness progressive sort of model, and they decide, no, we're going to shift, and the kids will shift. The kids start to thrive. I mean, I remember one school that they made a shift, and the next year we went and visited, and I think it was the 3rd or 4th grade teacher, and she said, our kids used to drag into the classroom in the morning. She said, now they come in running and joyful. And it was they'd put in routine, they'd put in recitations, they'd put in a solid curriculum that was content driven, and I mean, just in a few months, she saw that change in the children's. It's an irony, right? The modern model thinks they're going to make kids happier, and the reality is, because everything is so free and disordered, free in a bad sense, they are less happy.
Yeah. I mean, just think about even adults. Like when we're absolutely positively just unhindered, ungoverned, free, those are usually not the happiest times, right? Like it just nobody feels good after binge watching Netflix for 4 hours, right? When you thought, like, I've made a poor choice.
Is this something you really want to do at night, Jeremy? You've brought it up twice already.
No, I just think that this is like the stereotypical kind of like fault of modernity.
It is
like sitting in front of the television, because really, honestly, there's not a whole lot to do in the modern home anymore, right? I mean, if we can order food out, we don't have to spend hours cooking, right? If we can do this and do that in kind of a mechanized way, like we have this cleaning service come in and it does it for us. Like we kind of have a lot of time on our hands. What are we going to do with that? Well, you know what? Reading actually is kind of exhausting, right? I don't want to do that. What's much easier is just to fill myself with entertainment. I feel like that's kind of the sin of, that is the sin of modernity, is just entertainment. Like
passive.
It's okay to be bored. Right? I think boredom spurs us to do things. Boredom is actually kind of like the seed bed of inspiration.
I heard somebody say boredom is what is it? Hostility without enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I have to think about that.
But also, boredom is like the creator of originality.
Well,
right?
that's true too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want, it's the spur to actually doing something, because it's better than being bored.
Yeah.
Right.
Like boredom helps you pick up the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes, that's right.
Which is what I'm trying to do with the student right now. So it's just like,
duty helps you finish it.
Yeah, that's right. Right. When that student's going to come in and say, what'd you think about chapter, whatever, I'm going to be like, I need to read that thing.
And that's what happens. Like with my grandchildren, none of them have screens. So I think they read partly because there's nothing else to do right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's as great a motivator as anything.
Well, in some ways, that gets back to our conversation at the beginning about books, right? Like books that are entertaining. And you said we don't do that as much anymore. And you're right, because the entertainment we tend to get is passive through movies or TV series, screens. Whereas it used to be, you wanted entertainment at night, you read a book.
Yeah.
And so I think that's absolutely part of it.
Yeah.
And so this is all very, very striking, considering that last night I was so exhausted I sat in front of a TV for a couple hours. But
Paul and his principles, it comes out again.
But I watched Clarkson's Farm, and it was like, oh yeah, I should be out there with my cows. So it didn't take me too long to get up and.
It was motivating.
Yeah. But it's also funny to watch somebody. You're like, ooh, I just did that, and I have the same consequence. I should have watched this TV show first.
That saying, trucks drive straighter with a heavy load. That reminds me of that.
Oh, yes.
For children and for Paul, for everyone.
Yes.
Well, this was a great discussion.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's wonderful to have you.
Yeah.
And Paul and Martin, thanks for always being here.
Not always. And could be here next week.
True. We'll be gone for a while. And thank you for joining us too. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.